This short story is called Kataryna's Rest by Reddit user ScyllaVI. Before her 5th birthday, Kataryna was afraid of the night sky with all of its uncertainness. She would often cry herself to sleep or stare at a screen for hours on end after the sunset until, on her 5th birthday, her dad and grandfather took her to one of the few remaining forested areas in the planet to stare up into the stars with a telescope. The trip was uneasy, and she remembered more than anything holding her blanket between her arms as the vehicle moved forward. When they finally arrived, it was just about sunset, and the lights of the great continent-spanning city had already begun to glow in the distance behind them. The two older men started building the small home telescope while the young girl stared into the last few rays of sunshine, trying to feel and somehow keep the day alive. "Hey, Katie, the telescope is ready, and the sky looks clear. Come, check this out." Kataryna looked back as her father spoke, and she spotted her grandfather looking into the cylindrical object. The sky began to turn black around them, and the sounds of flora and fauna she'd only really knew in shows and movies made her skin go pale as she ran for her father. "Daddy, I'm scared," she moaned. "Everything is dark out here. I want to go home." She hugged her dad's leg tightly and looked up to see him smile. "Oh, don't worry, sweetie. It's not completely dark out here." He picked her up and held her with one arm while pointing to the many dots in the night sky. "There are many stars just like our sun up there, ready to shine on us brightly in the dark skies." He lifted her face softly and pointed at the orange dot that was noticeably bigger than the rest. "That one up there is called Calypta, and it is the closest star." Katie's dad then put her down and helped her with adjusting the telescope. "All right, we have Calypta in our sights, and we should not be going blind when we see it." Katie knew her grandfather was smiling when he said that. "Okay, Katie, don't move the telescope one bit when you lean in, or you might lose it," her dad said. Katie moved in and gently placed her eyes on the lens. "What do you see?" At first, it was blurry. A ball of light, not unlike the other stars. Then, she could see it clearly. The arches that swung from its sides, the brightness amidst the occasional darker spots, and the mesmerizing surface which glued her eyes to the lens. Her mind filled with questions as her mouth tried to catch up. "Daddy, what is it?" Her voice swung from fear to awe. "It's a star, honey, much like our own." He chuckled as he looked at his own father's smile. "Except this one is really close." "You think I can ever go over there?" Katie took her eye off the telescope and looked up at both men. They looked at each other, and Katie's dad shrugged as the older man spoke. "Well, if you study hard enough, you just might." "I promise you, I will go up there, Grandpa," Katie said enthusiastically, before looking back at the star. The night passed quickly, and at midnight, Katie drew a drawing of a stick woman standing on the surface of the orange star she had looked at all night. She had wonderful dreams that night. It was Kataryna's 10th birthday, which meant that she would receive her first ever birthday gift, and her whole extended family would visit. Katie was excited to learn this, but it quickly dawned on her that not many people her age were coming. Katie's family was filled with uncles and cousins who were either far too old or just babies at the time, so Katie spent the time with her father and Grandpa. She talked about the latest space voyage undertaken by the Empire. The news said that they located definitely more than one human group this time. The young girl's eyes filled with wonder as she talked. Can you imagine what kind of people live in Calypta? Her dad chuckled, but her grandfather looked up for a minute before responding. Well, I have no clue. It might just be up to you to find out, the old man said. The young girl smiled widely before looking into her grandfather's eyes. He noticed she had something to say, but her eyes revealed the words were not coming to her. Finally, she asked, Grandpa, how did people end up in Calypta anyways? Do you know the story? Well, I was not alive back when it happened, but... The old man saw his son nod as he spoke. A long, long time ago, a lot of bad people ruined the place where we were born. The air became toxic, and you could not go outside without a mask. So many people left in very big spaceships and came all the way over here. Katie's eyes widened in surprise. You mean that we are not from here? She pointed downwards and stepped a few times on the concrete floor. No, we are from this planet, but our race was born on a planet far, far away from here. Can we ever go back? The two men looked at one another as Katie's dad bit into a piece of cake and swallowed. Well, if you try hard enough, you just might be the one to revisit our ancient home. He smiled and winked at his daughter. Katie grinned and stood up with one foot on a plastic table before declaring confidently, I will be the one to find our old home. Unfortunately, or very fortunately for young Katie, her grandmother and aunt came in and interrupted her moment of glory while holding a box wrapped in paper. Katie's eyes widened as she saw the gift, and her mind went wild for the minute between seeing it and getting her hands around it. As the family began singing a traditional song, Katie opened the box and her mouth dropped when she saw what was inside. Katie then went back to posing as a victorious hero with her hand on the white and red astronaut action figure before pressing the button to hear the slogan of Imperial astronauts. Calypta, here we go! Calypta, here we go. It was Katie's 20th birthday, and she had not at all envisioned to spend such an important day in the small room of the space station reading about orbital dynamics, while smacking her head repeatedly against the wall whenever she fell asleep or got distracted. Her muscles ached from the low-gravity environment, her eyes felt like they could close any second, and her mind had spent so much time staring at graphs and numbers that she dreamt of them when her eyes closed. She was jolted back from her drowsiness by the melodic tune of an incoming call on the monitor. Commander Herbert was calling. Great. Grabbing a headband from her arm and tying her hair as best as she could with just the screen's reflection, she answered the call with a press of a button. A picture appeared in the screen showing an older man with hair cut so cleanly it looked unreal. Miss Lang, he said, I'd like a quick word. Katie turned her head to the side. Hello, Commander. I was not expecting a call, if I'm to be frank. The response took a few seconds to arrive. A quirk of long-distance communication. My apologies, Miss Lang. I know it is a sudden request, but I'd like to talk to you about your recent paper, about the viability of transporting with the slingshot method, he said. Oh, she felt herself sweat as she sat straighter in her seat. Sorry, but I thought it would take longer to process my paper. Is everything okay with it? Katie cursed the light lag and began to tap her foot on the floor. Usually the process takes much longer, but I came across your paper by accident and decided to give her to read. Impressive methodology, though it could use a lot of work. It was more of a draft, if I'm being honest. More of a proof of concept than a real proposal for interplanetary travel, she said. Monotone, practiced. Impressive, nonetheless. Your model conceives of a ship trajectory that would be 9.6% more effective than current methods. Correct, sir, she said, finding a bit more confidence in her voice. A lot of it depends on the model of spacecraft used and if the weight of the vessel factors in, but we can cut from the current fuel expenditure of space travel. And how sure are you of this method? The commander said after a few seconds. I'd hop in the spacecraft without a doubt, she said with a bit of a smile. Good. Just one more thing, Miss Lang, he said. You think you can make it 12%? He said. Kataryna Lang smiled widely before answering. That's right, Katie. It'll just be us, some food, and the movies tonight, Victor said. Katie mustered a smile, and one arm hugged her fiancé as tightly as she could, which was not at all in her current state. Her body ached all over from being in the planet's gravity once more after so much time. She took another step forward, with the help of the crutches and his shoulder to lean on. How was it? He said between steps, gingerly looking her in the eyes. It was... Katie looked at the cloudy sky as if she would find Newland's comment and just pointed it with one of her hands. Very, very cold and really slippery, she said with a smile. Bright too? Pretty bright from here. Not as much as I expected, but yes, pretty bright, she said. They walked across a busy street and made their way to one of the monorail trails that connected the buildings. I kept thinking about this. Katie searched for his hand between steps and gave it a tight squeeze. The whole way. Really? He said. I must be one hell of a guy for you to think about me while you step on a comet. Katie smiled and bumped her shoulder slightly against his. It gets very silent up there. Lonely. I'm happy to be where I belong, she said with a smile. The pair eventually arrived at the subway car and traveled holding each other for as long as Katie could stay awake. When she fell asleep on top of him, Victor was too scared to move a muscle and wake her up. When they arrived at the station, he woke her up and the two stumbled to get to their feet and out of the monorail. During the whole walk back to their home, they held each other close. Katie struggled to go up the stairs to their apartment, even with Victor's help. She was tired, so drained mentally and exhausted physically, she almost fell in the hallway that led to their door. She didn't notice the change on the door or the colors at all. It was only when the door was opened that she noticed it. A big pair of numbered balloons and several wrapped boxes beneath them. She didn't have the energy to cry. In fact, she almost fell and was caught by Victor. Oh, babe, thank you. I forgot. Thank you. She hugged him tight, for real this time. Happy 28th birthday, Kataryna. He hugged her back carefully. My comet-walking wonder girl. The first thought that Katie had when she woke up was that it was her 34th birthday. She felt the pain in her left hand and heard the craft's alarms before opening her eyes. A flood of memory hit her and she wished for a moment not to be awake at all. That she would be awake once more and to be with Victor or with her dad back home. She opened her eyes and unbuckled herself from the seat. Low gravity lifted her up into into the chunks of debris that floated all over the craft's small interior. She turned to look and saw August dead on his chair. A piece of debris had cracked his helmet. Lack of oxygen. Peaceful. The other member of her crew was nowhere to be found. Katie skipped in the low gravity towards the door and realized it had been opened hours ago. An ugly feeling surged in her chest. Just how long had she been here? Where was here? Her breathing came in faster and harder, and when she looked outside and saw the blackness of space over a grey alien land, memories flooded her mind, and she retracted her legs as much as the suit allowed. Victor, Dad, Centralis, the city, the monorail, coffee, animals, kids, life. It all seemed so small and distant. She saw a tear float in front of her eyes and spotted an orange light. Calypta, here we go. Right. She tried to control her breathing and remember the mission. She was on an alien, unknowable world beyond the Corona system, home. The mission had been to establish contact with the humans living in the Calypta system and return all. Like a machine given an instruction, Kataryna made her way over to the ship's diagnostics and checked the oxygen and air in the ship. It was enough for an hour. Enough. She then hopped to the back of the craft and grabbed at an instrument. Could barely feel her left hand, but she willed herself to grab at the device and drag it across the interior of the craft. She reached the door and opened it. The telescope was not really a telescope, but an advanced photothermal imaging piece of hardware that linked to the tight beam emitter with a range of over 1 trillion. She set the telescope transmitter on the pale grey dusty ground just outside the ship and began setting the lens to track one star while the other device tracked another. Data reads began being collected and processed. The machine zoomed on points of interest. Information began being processed to be sent home. Tenderly, she put her helmet next to the eyepiece and watched. Arcs of light and plasma rose from the orange star. Craft of other makes soared between planets and moons, with great constellations spanning across land and sea alike. A comet soared away from the orange star. She stood there for a long time. After enough, she took off her helmet and saw the majestic views one last time. And far away, a drawing made long ago came alive.